The alley was a forgotten place, a narrow strip of concrete and brick that the city seemed to have turned its back on. During the day, it was a shortcut for delivery drivers. At night, it belonged to the shadows, the rustle of scavenging raccoons, and the cold glow of a single flickering security light. On this particular night, the usual quiet was ripped apart by a sound that didn't belong there, the raw, guttural roar of motorcycle engines. The noise wasn't just loud. It was angry, violent, echoing off the close walls and filling the space with a sense of threat. 2 motorcycles rolled in, their headlights cutting harsh beams through the gloom. The riders, clad in dark leather, were more like silhouettes than men. Their faces were hidden, one by the shadow of his helmet's visor, the other by a thick, shaggy beard. They didn't speak. The one on the larger bike killed his engine, and the sudden silence felt heavier than the noise had been. He swung a leg off the bike and walked to his saddlebag. From it, he pulled out a small, limp bundle wrapped in a dirty piece of cloth. It was a puppy. A little cream-colored thing, so small it could have fit in a man's 2 hands. It wasn't moving. Its fur was matted, and its eyes were closed. The man held it without any care, like it was a bag of garbage he'd forgotten to throw out. He looked at his companion, who gave a short, sharp nod from his bike. There was no discussion, no last look. The man just walked a few steps to the overflowing dumpster, its sides stained and reeking, and dropped the little body beside it. The bundle landed with a soft, heartbreaking thud on the greasy pavement. The second man revved his engine once, a sound that felt like a final, cruel punctuation mark. Then the first man got back on his bike, kicked it to life, and with another deafening roar, the 2 of them sped out of the alley, leaving behind a cloud of exhaust, fumes, and a deep, ringing silence. For a long time, nothing moved. A scrap of newspaper fluttered in the damp breeze. The flickering light buzzed overhead. The puppy lay where it had been discarded, a sad little mound against the huge, ugly bulk of the dumpster. It was a scene of complete and utter abandonment, but the alley had its own quiet life, its own residents who knew every crack and hiding place. From a dark hole in the brickwork near the ground, a pair of eyes watched. They were green, sharp, and had seen everything. The owner of those eyes was a cat. She was a tortoiseshell, a mix of brown, black, and orange, but she was so thin you could see the lines of her ribs. One side of her face was mostly black, a patch that covered her eye like a pirate's mask, which is why the few people who ever saw her might have called her Patch. She was a creature of pure survival. She knew the schedule of the dump truck, the best times to find leftover food, and which dogs to avoid. She had heard the bikes and frozen in her shelter. Now, cautiously, her nose twitched, testing the air. The smell of gasoline and fear was new. She slipped out of her hole, her body low to the ground, every step deliberate and silent. She wasn't curious about the men. They were gone. She was curious about what they had left. She approached the small bundle slowly, her tail flicking. She stopped a few inches away, stretching her neck to sniff. It didn't smell like food. It smelled like another animal, but wrong, weak, and cold. She nudged it with her paw. It was soft, but it didn't react. The cat circled it once, then twice, her instincts conflicted. This wasn't a threat. It wasn't a meal. So what was it? Then, something deep and old, an instinct older than alleyways and dumpsters, seemed to stir in her. She made a decision. Instead of walking away to continue her hunt for scraps, she carefully stepped closer. She lowered herself onto the cold ground, and then she did the most unbelievable thing. She curled her own skinny, fragile body right around the cold puppy. She tucked her paws in and wrapped her tail around, trying to envelop the little form. She began to lick the puppy's head with her rough tongue, over and over, Grooming its matted fur Dot, it was a hopeless task. The night was cold, the puppy was not moving, and the cat had little warmth of her own to give. But she stayed. Hours passed. The moon tracked across the narrow strip of sky above the alley. The cat would occasionally get up, stretch her stiff legs, and then settle back into the exact same position, resuming her gentle, persistent licking. She was keeping vigil. She was, in the only way she knew how, refusing to let this tiny creature be alone in the dark. She was a stray, with nothing to give, but in that moment, she gave everything she had, her warmth, her attention, her simple, silent companionship in the face of a terrible loneliness. The alley was no longer just a place of abandonment. It had become a place of a quiet, stubborn, and utterly unexpected kindness. The night grew deeper and colder. A damp chill settled into the alley, the kind that seeps into bones. The stray cat, her fur fluffed up against the cold, never stopped. She kept her body coiled tightly around the little puppy, a living blanket against the concrete. Her rough, pink tongue worked steadily, licking the puppy's face, its ears, its tiny paws. She was cleaning it, but it was more than that. It was a rhythm, a pulse of care in the still darkness. Every so often she would pause, rest her chin on the puppy's side, and just listen. Then she'd start again, the soft rasping sound the only sign of life in that corner. She had kittens once. It was a long time ago, in a different place, before the alley. That memory wasn't a picture in her mind, but a feeling deep in her muscles, an old knowing that told her what to do when something small and helpless was near. This creature was not her kitten. It smelled all wrong like dog, like sickness, like human carelessness. But the feeling was the same. The need to protect, to warm, to clean, was stronger than any rule about cats and dogs or streets and strangers. Once, a rat scurried too close, drawn by the strange stillness. In a flash, the cat's head shot up. A low, warning growl vibrated in her throat, a sound far bigger than her thin frame suggested she could make. Her green eyes fixed on the rodent, hard and shining in the dark. The rat hesitated, then turned and vanished into a drain. The message was clear. This spot, this sad little bundle, was under her protection, no doubt, as the deepest hour of the night passed. Something almost too faint to notice happened. A tremor, a tiny shivering twitch in the puppy's back leg where it pressed against the cat's belly. The cat felt it instantly. She stopped licking and went perfectly still, all her attention focused on the feeling against her fur. It came again. A slight, spastic jerk. It wasn't movement from a healthy sleep. It was the raw, electrical flicker of a body that was almost gone, fighting on some deep, automatic level to stay alive. The cat reacted not with surprise, but with a redoubled effort. She started licking more vigorously, focusing on the puppy's chest and neck. She nuzzled it more firmly, a gentle push to say, "Wake up, wake up." The puppy's breathing, which had been so shallow it was invisible, now showed as the faintest mist in the cold air, a tiny puff that disappeared almost immediately. The warmth from the cat's body, so patiently given, was doing its slow, miraculous work. The terrible, cold stillness was retreating, millimeter by millimeter, beaten back by stubborn, relentless affection. High above, the sky began to change. The inky black softened to a dark gray. The security light's buzz seemed louder as its electric glow was washed out by the coming dawn. The world was about to wake up, and with it came the sounds of the city's first shift, distant garbage trucks, the rumble of the first bus on the main road. The cat was getting tired. She had been awake and working for hours. Her muscles ached from the cold and the tense position. But she didn't leave. She shifted slightly, rearranging herself to better cover the puppy, and continued her quiet vigil. Her eyes, heavy with exhaustion, stayed open, constantly scanning the alley entrance. She was waiting for something. Maybe for danger. Or maybe, in some way she couldn't understand, for help. The light grew stronger, turning the alley from a place of shadows into a place of dirty, clear reality. You could see the grime on the walls, the oily puddles, the sad state of the dumpster. And now, anyone who looked could see the two of them clearly. A painfully thin stray cat curled around a small, dirty, cream-colored puppy. The cat heard the footsteps first. Human footsteps, solid and quick, coming down the alley from the street. This was the time the woman with the kind voice sometimes walked through, the one who once left a bowl of food far from her hole, so she wouldn't be scared. The cat's head lifted. Her body went tense, ready to flee. Every instinct told her to run, to vanish back into her brick hole and save herself. Humans were loud, unpredictable, and often dangerous. She looked down at the puppy. It shivered again, a more definite shake this time. The cat looked at the approaching figure, now visible as a woman in a comfortable coat, carrying a thermos. She looked back at the puppy. The fight inside her was fierce. Run, stay, hide, protect Dot with a resolve that seemed to cost her greatly. The cat made her choice. She did not run. Instead, she did something extraordinary. She slowly, deliberately stood up. She stretched her stiff legs right there in the open, never taking her eyes off the woman. Then she looked straight at the human, and she let out a sound. It wasn't a scared hiss. It wasn't a regular meow. It was a short, urgent, pleading cry. "Arink," she said it again, louder. Then she looked down at the puppy and nudged it with her nose, before looking back at the woman and crying out once more. Dot. It was an announcement. A request. A desperate attempt to bridge the gap between her wild world and the human one. She was saying, "Look here. Something is wrong. Help." And then, to show she meant no threat, she sat down right beside the puppy, her body still touching it, and waited, her wide green eyes fixed on the human who had stopped walking and was now staring, her hand over her mouth at the unbelievable scene before her. The cat's work through the long, cold night was done. She had kept the spark alive. Now she was trying to pass it on. The woman with the thermos froze. Her morning shortcut through the alley was a habit, a quiet moment before her long shift at the office. She expected to see maybe a stray plastic bag, the usual clutter. She did not expect to see a cat standing guard over what looked like a dead puppy. Her heart sank. It was a sad sight, the kind that makes you want to look away. She thought the mother cat was mourning her own. A pang of sympathy hit her. The least she could do, she thought, was to move the little body somewhere more peaceful, maybe wrap it up. She took a cautious step forward. The cat didn't run. That was the first strange thing. It just looked at her and let out another one of those raspy, desperate cries. The woman spoke softly, the way you might talk to a nervous child. "It's okay," she whispered, though it clearly wasn't. "I'm not going to hurt you." She knelt down a few feet away, the cold damp of the concrete seeping through her pants. Up close, the scene was even more heartbreaking. The cat was all skin and bone, but it was planted firmly beside the puppy. The puppy itself was so small, so still, its fur matted with dirt and something that looked like grease. The woman's eyes began to well up. This was just too sad. She reached out a hand slowly, not towards the cat, but to gently touch the puppy, to confirm what she already believed. Her fingertips brushed the cold, damp fur. And then she saw it. Just under the cream-colored fuzz, a tiny, almost invisible flutter. A vein, a pulse. It was so faint, it was like watching a whisper. She jerked her hand back, startled. "Oh my God," she breathed out loud. "Oh my God, no. This wasn't a body. This was a life hanging by the thinnest thread imaginable. The sudden shift from sadness to emergency sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. All the sleepiness of the morning was gone, replaced by a sharp, clear focus. She looked at the cat, who was watching her intently. "You stayed with him?" she said, amazement cutting through her panic. "You kept him alive." There was no time to think. She shrugged off her coat, not caring about the grimy ground. The soft fleece lining was warm from her body heat. She worked quickly but carefully, her hands now steady with purpose. She used the coat like a sling, sliding it under the puppy. The cat stood up, nervous, letting out a small worried sound, but not interfering. It was as if the cat understood that this was the next step. "It's okay, girl, it's okay," the woman murmured, bundling the puppy into the cocoon of her coat. It was so light, it felt like nothing. She cradled the bundle against her chest, feeling a terrifying fragility. She could feel a faint, irregular heartbeat against her own through the layers of fabric. Or was that just her own heart pounding? She stood up. "I have to go," she said to the cat. "I have to get help." She turned and took a few quick steps toward the alley's entrance, toward her car parked on the street. Then she heard the footsteps. Light, skittering footsteps on the concrete behind her. She glanced back. The cat was following her. Not closely, but keeping a steady distance of about 10 feet, its eyes huge and fixed on the bundle in her arms. The woman stopped. The cat stopped. The woman took another step. The cat followed. A wild thought crossed her mind. She couldn't leave the cat. This skinny creature, who had performed a night-long miracle, was now alone in the cold alley. And it was clearly attached. "You want to come too?" she asked. The cat just stared. The woman made a decision. She couldn't chase it, and she couldn't wait. The puppy was the priority. "Okay," she said. "Okay, follow me if you want." She hurried to her car, a small, used sedan. She opened the passenger door and laid the coat-wrapped puppy as gently as she could on the seat. She turned to close the door, and there was the cat, sitting just a few feet from the bumper, looking uncertainly at the vehicle. The woman quickly opened the back door. "In or out," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "But I have to go now." To her utter astonishment, the cat didn't hesitate. It darted forward, a blur of brown and black, and leaped into the back footwell of the car, curling itself into the smallest possible ball on the dirty floor mat. It wasn't comfortable, but it was inside. It had chosen to stay with the puppy. The woman slammed the doors and got in the driver's seat. Her hands were shaking as she started the car. The nearest animal hospital was a 20-minute drive away. She drove faster than she should have, breaking speed limits, running a yellow light that was definitely turning red. Every few seconds, she'd glance at the passenger seat. The puppy hadn't moved. In the rearview mirror, she could see just the tips of the cat's ears, peeking up from the back. "Stay with me, little one," she whispered, not sure if she was talking to the dog or the cat or herself. "Just stay with me?" The world outside the car windows was just waking up, people heading to work, getting coffee, living their normal lives. Inside the car, it felt like a tiny speeding emergency room. The woman talked the whole way, a stream of calming nonsense. "We're almost there. You're gonna be okay. That cat, she's something else, isn't she? You're a fighter. I can tell." She pulled into the veterinary clinic's parking lot with a screech of tires. Grabbing the bundled coat from the seat, she flung her door open. She paused for a second, looking back at the cat in the footwell. Its eyes were like green saucers in the dark. "You wait here," she said firmly. "I'll be back for you. I promise." Then she ran, the bundle held tight, through the automatic doors and into the bright, sterile light of the clinic lobby. A young woman at the front desk looked up, a routine greeting on her lips. It died when she saw the woman's face, pale and stricken, and the bundle in her arms. "I need help," the woman said, her voice cracking for the first time. "I found this puppy. It's almost gone, and there's a cat in my car who wouldn't leave its side." The desk clerk's professional calm snapped into action. "Back here now," she called, hitting a button and coming around the desk. The doors to the treatment area swung open. The race against time had moved from a cold alley to a bright, clean room, and a new set of hands was about to take over the fight that a stray cat had refused to lose. The bright lights of the treatment room felt harsh after the gloom of the alley. The woman stood back, her arms now empty and feeling strangely cold, as the veterinary team swarmed around the metal table. They moved with a quiet, efficient urgency that was both reassuring and terrifying. A young vet with tired but kind eyes took charge, her hands gentle but swift as she unwrapped the coat. What she saw made her press her lips into a thin line. The puppy was in bad shape. Worse than bad. It was a small, fragile body shutting down. Dehydration, hypothermia, and a nasty infection were fighting a winning battle against the tiny life force inside. "We need warmth now. IV fluids, line here. Glucose, let's get a temp," the vet said, her voice calm but leaving no room for delay. A technician wrapped the puppy in a soft, warming blanket. Another shaved a tiny patch on a frail leg to insert a catheter. The puppy was so still, it barely seemed to react to the prick. The woman from the alley watched, wringing her hands. She felt like she was intruding on a private war. "Is he? Will he?" "We're doing everything we can," the vet said, not looking up, her focus entirely on the monitors and the tiny patient. "You said you found him? Where?" The story tumbled out. "The alley, the dumpster, the motorcycles." And then the part that made the vet pause and finally look up. A stray cat was with him, curled right around him. She followed me to the car. "She's in my back seat right now?" The vet blinked. The technician who was holding the puppy's leg steady glanced over. "She kept him warm," the vet murmured, almost to herself. She looked at the puppy's temperature reading, critically low, but not zero. She probably saved his life, or at least gave him this chance. That word, chance, hung in the air. It was a small word for such a big thing. Out in the lobby, the story was already spreading in hushed tones. The front desk clerk had told another waiting client. That client texted a friend. It was a strange, sad, and miraculous little tale, perfect for cutting through the usual morning chatter. Someone took out a phone and carefully, without showing the puppy, typed out a short post on a local community page. It wasn't dramatic. It just said a badly hurt puppy had been brought in after being abandoned, and a stray cat had protected him all night. They were looking for information, and any help for his care would be appreciated. They attached a photo, not of the puppy, but of the woman's empty, dirty coat on the chair. Back in the treatment room, the first small victory came. The puppy, now named Baby by the staff for paperwork, gave a weak, almost sigh-like whimper as the warm fluids began to seep into its veins. It wasn't a cry of pain, but a sound, a signal that the lights were still on somewhere inside. The vet allowed herself a small breath of relief. "Okay," she said. "Okay, he's fighting. Let's keep going." The woman felt a sob catch in her throat. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. "What about the cat?" she asked. "She's so thin, and she's just sitting in my car." The vet nodded. "Bring her in the back way. We'll check her out. She's a hero. She deserves at least a meal and a look over." The woman hurried back to her car, her heart still pounding, but for a different reason now. She opened the back door. The cat was still there, a tense little ball on the floor mat. It looked up at her, its expression unreadable. "Come on," the woman said softly. "Your friend is okay. The doctors are helping. Let's get you something to eat." She reached in slowly. The cat flinched, but didn't run. It let the woman pick it up, its body tense and light as a feather in her arms. She carried it into the clinic, through a side door, into a quieter examination room. The difference was striking. With the puppy, the energy had been frantic, life-saving. With the cat, it was gentle, thankful. A different technician brought in a small bowl of wet food, the rich smell filling the room. The cat, for all its earlier courage, was still a starving stray. It hesitated for only a second before plunging its face into the bowl, eating with a desperate, grateful urgency that was hard to watch as it ate. The technician gave it a gentle check. No major injuries, just the wear and tear of street life fleas. A little scar by its ear, and of course, that striking black patch over its eye. It was a female, likely around 2 years old. "She's used to looking after things, isn't she?" The technician mused, watching the cat guard the empty bowl after licking it clean. Meanwhile, the story online was starting to do its quiet work. The community post was being shared. A local animal rescue, a small organization run by a couple out of their home, saw it. They called the clinic immediately. "We'll cover the initial emergency costs for the puppy," the woman from the rescue said without hesitation. "And we have a foster home for the cat, if she needs one. They shouldn't be separated after that." When the vet came out to the woman from the alley to give an update, she had the first hint of a real smile. "He's stable. It's going to be a long road. He needs antibiotics, round-the-clock care, but he's breathing on his own. He has a chance." Then she added, "And that rescue, they're going to help. With everything. Including the cat." The woman felt a flood of emotions: relief, exhaustion, and a profound sense of wonder. She looked into the room where the cat was now curled on a soft towel, asleep for the first time in what was probably days. Its body finally relaxed. It had done its job. It had passed the spark it kept alive to others. She thought about the bikers in the dark. Their callous act meant to end a life. And then she thought of this chain that had formed since. A cat who refused to give up, a person on a morning walk who paid attention, a vet who acted fast, strangers online who cared enough to share and help. An act of cruelty had been met, step by step, by a series of small kindnesses. It didn't erase the badness, not at all. But it built something new over top of it. The vet put a hand on her shoulder. "You did good today," she said. "It wasn't me," the woman replied, her eyes on the sleeping cat. "I just showed up after the real work was done." The story didn't end in the sterile rooms of the animal hospital. That was just the middle. The real ending, the good part, was built slowly. In quiet rooms, and with gentle hands, over weeks that turned into months. The puppy, who the rescue folks started calling Ember because of the tiny spark of life the cat had kept glowing, had a long fight ahead. He didn't go to a foster home right away. He stayed at the clinic for a while, a tiny patient in a heated incubator. The infection in his little body was tough, and there were days when the vet would come in and hold her breath, checking to see if he was still with them. But every time she did, Ember would manage a slow, tired wag of his tail. It wasn't the joyful thrashing of a healthy pup. It was a deliberate, effortful asterisk thump, thump. Thump asterisk against the soft blankets, as if he was saying, "I'm still here. I'm trying." The cat, who they named Guardian, went to the rescue's foster home. It was a calm house with a sunny spare room. For the first 2 days, Guardian didn't do much. She ate, she slept in the soft bed they gave her, and she hid under a chair. She was recovering from a lifetime of tension. The foster family would sit quietly in the room, reading a book or just talking softly, letting her get used to the sound of kind voices. They didn't force her. They just waited. And then, a week after the alley, the vet called the rescue with news. Ember was well enough to leave. He wasn't completely better, but he was strong enough to continue his recovery in a home. He needed medicine, special food, and a lot of rest. The rescue coordinator had an idea. What about Guardian's foster home? She asked. Should we try? Everyone was nervous. A sick puppy and a shy, stray cat? It could be a disaster. The cat might be stressed. The puppy might be scared. But the story of what Guardian had done in that alley was like a quiet whisper in all their minds. They had to at least try. The day Ember came to the house, Guardian was hiding under the couch in the living room. The foster mom brought the puppy in, a small, wobbly, cream-colored thing bundled in a blanket. He still looked fragile, his fur patchy from where it had been shaved for IVs, but his eyes were bright and curious. She set the blanket down gently on the rug. Everyone held their breath. A small, black and brown face peered out from under the couch. Guardian's green eyes were wide. She stared at the little bundle on the floor. Slowly, cautiously, she crept out. She didn't approach right away. She circled the room, keeping her distance, her nose twitching. Ember watched her, his head tilted, and gave a soft, unsure whimper. That sound did it. Guardian stopped her circling. Her posture, which had been low and cautious, relaxed. She walked over, not with haste, but with a clear purpose. She sniffed Ember from head to tail. And then, as if she had just come home from a long trip, she simply lay down right beside him. She started to lick his face, the same rough, caring licks from the alley, cleaning his ears. His muzzle. Ember let out a deep sigh, a sound of pure contentment, and wiggled his body closer to her side. Then he fell asleep. Guardian rested her head on her paws, keeping watch, and closed her eyes too. The foster mom, watching from the doorway, felt tears roll down her cheeks. It wasn't just cute. It was a kind of healing. They both remembered each other. And in that moment, the scary alley was far, far away. They were a unit after that. Where Ember went, Guardian was nearby. As Ember grew stronger, learning to walk properly on his little legs, Guardian would walk beside him, her tail held high like a flag. When he would tumble over, she would nudge him back up with her head. When it was time for his medicine, which he hated, he would hide his face in Guardian's fur afterward. She would put up with it, patiently. The story of the abandoned puppy and the Guardian cat had spread through the local community. The rescue posted careful updates, a picture of two tails curled together, a video of Guardian gently herding a wobbly Ember away from the stairs. People followed their progress. They weren't just sad for them anymore. They were rooting for them. Donations came in, not just for Ember and Guardian, but for other animals the rescue helped. That one act of kindness in an alley was now feeding and healing other creatures in need. When the time came for them to be adopted, the rescue was very careful. They weren't just looking for a home for a puppy or a home for a cat. They were looking for a home for them, a family. They interviewed many people, but they were waiting for the right feeling. It came with a quiet couple who had seen the story from the beginning. They didn't have a flashy application. They just had a calm house with a big, soft sofa and a safe, fenced yard. When they came to visit, they didn't rush. They sat on the floor and let Ember and Guardian come to them. The man had a deep, soft voice. The woman moved slowly and gently. Ember, now plump and playful, climbed into the woman's lap. Guardian, after a long look, jumped up and settled in the man's, purring like a small engine. The couple looked at each other, and then at the foster mom, and just nodded. There was nothing else to say. The day they left for their new home, the foster mom packed their few toys and their favorite blanket. She carried them out to the car. Ember bounced excitedly on his new leash. Guardian followed calmly, carried in the arms of her new dad. She looked back once, just once, at the foster mom. There was no fear in her green eyes, just a quiet understanding. Her job, the job she had started in a cold, dark alley, was finally completely done. She had guarded the spark into a flame. Now she was going to live in its warmth. The car drove away, leaving the quiet street behind. In the back window, you could just make out two shapes sitting close together. One small and creamy, one patchy and dark. A family, not born together, but built from kindness, chosen in the aftermath of cruelty. They were going home. And somewhere, in a forgotten alley, a spot by a dumpster held nothing but an old memory, completely washed away by the simple, unsee